Hey, thanks. I want to get into the technology, but first I thought I'd throw a couple of stats that I don't think are going to come as a huge surprise. Basically, lots of kids have smartphones, they're spending a ton of time on it, and their parents are worried. How many people in the room does that resonate with? Yeah, me too. I have a 12-year-old, and it's obviously a hugely important discussion. Probably burying our heads in the sand isn't going to work. Totally regulating it isn't going to work, nor is giving them free rein. Before we get into, though, how Aura's technology works, I think you both have fairly personal stories about why this issue matters.
Well, I think maybe just to frame the conversation, we should actually start with some statistics that are pretty new and they're pretty raw, which I really love Hari. I gave my phone away here, so I actually don't have them in front of me. Made that mistake. But I think Hari knows them mostly. So we'll get into and discuss, but Hari launched a new product, this digital parenting product, about 6 weeks or so ago. But from January 1 till April 1, we had 2,500 beta users of this. So these were kids between 13 and 17 years old. And maybe you can just rattle off the stats of the data out of that 2,500 user set.
Yeah, so we're tracking behavior and behavioral changes so we can actually see what's happening with kids over that window of time. I wish it was all positive. I think we're seeing a lot more negative than one would like, and I think it's a part of the sentiment that we're seeing a lot of data from even government bodies that are starting to come out. But in general, I think kids are on these devices about 8 hours a day, which again, if you think about a window of time, it's a significant portion of it. When you look at sort of emotional issues, about half of kids in high school age say that they are depressed, and we can see that in the data, meaning they have long windows of time where they're on devices doom scrolling, or they have sleep irregularities as well.
So 22% of them are up at night past bedtime on these devices.
About 20% end up engaging, and unfortunately, a lot of it's different actually by boys or girls. We're seeing very different patterns. With girls, especially, we're seeing about 22% sort of engage in what we call negative coping strategies. Could be cutting, it could be restricting calories, suicidal ideation, and situations where they actually have a method and a plan are quite high. About 22% we're seeing with negative coping strategies. About 10%. With active sort of suicidal ideation or thoughts.
And that's actually sort of what got you into this. I mean, for those that don't know Aura, the original business largely focused on, identity theft and that sort of thing. Talk a little bit about what brought you into this family safety.
When I started this company, the view was pretty simple, which is technology is great. It can do lots of amazing things. And especially on the enterprise side, there's a lot of guardrails. Like companies set up guardrails for how to use technology. But for consumers and families, we don't know. Like we think that everything's safe, our data's out there. It's very hard to figure out how to secure yourself. So our view was, let's take a lot of these things that are very complicated and make it super simple for consumers and families. So that's how we started. And then I'd say we kind of progressed where it initially started just with devices to then doing more and more things for families. So families who come to us and say, hey, we're really worried about our kids being on these devices for so much time. Can you do content filtering? Can you start doing time limits, et cetera, on these devices? So we started adding those things in, and then about 2.5 years ago, I have 4 kids, and I have 2 device-age kids, and one of them went through a super rough time. And again, we're a pretty tight-knit family, and so with her, she was, I'd say it was sort of February of that year, she started saying, hey, I don't feel great, and we said, okay, well, maybe you're just overwhelmed, there's too much stuff going on with school. Let's wait till the summer. Summer rolls around, it was June at that point, and we thought, okay, well, she's gonna be excited because no school and you got a few months off, but it went the opposite way. She was like in bed, didn't want to get up. She was clearly just quite depressed, and all of it was actually, frankly, super confusing for us because we didn't know that there was a lot of this underlying stuff, and it progressed where it got worse and worse and worse. So by about August, it was very clear she needed help. Like we had to go get her some help, and she was engaging in things that were kind of scary for me as a dad. And so we took her in. We dropped her off at this thing called CBAT. We're in Boston. It's called community-based therapy. It's not actual hospitalization, but sort of a level below that. And we as a family had never ever looked at her phone before. We were very like hyper privacy oriented. Kids should have agency. They should sort of, make their own mistakes and try to figure stuff out. But this facility didn't allow for her to bring her phone in. So we brought the phone back, we get back home. That's the first time I actually pick up the phone and look at it, and it is absolutely shocking. Like I would never have guessed in a million years all the things that were going through her head and like the things that she was doing and she was engaging with. And
that's the point, which is that today you can have a teenager sitting across the table from you and you don't actually know who they're with, what they're doing, or really where they're at. They may be across the table, but that's not where they are at. When we all grew up, our parents had answers to those things. You could be a parent, and parenting doesn't mean suffocating. It means guiding.
But you knew who your kids were hanging out with. You knew what they were doing.
You knew what they were doing. And today, literally, you know this with your 13-year-old, you actually are flying blind. And here's an amazing thing. In a couple of years, your kid's going to become driving age. Well, you don't just hand them the keys to the car. They get a learner's permit. You go to a Walmart parking lot that's very big and nothing around, and you onboard them. And over a series of a period of time and years, they earn the skill and the capabilities and the guidelines to actually be able to get in a car and drive. Well, I have news for you. The damage that we are doing to our kids in terms of the online, unsupervised, unparented, is destroying a generation. It's that bad.
What I find interesting, though, is you could have gone through that experience, Hari, and one response, which would be very natural, is I want to build something so I know exactly what they're doing. I want to monitor every step. And there's sort of a natural feeling as a parent that, maybe if I know everything, I'm better. But that's not the approach you took.
Yeah,
the approach you took was, how do we balance? Because eventually the kid's going to be making their own decisions.
Yep.
How do we give parents insights without giving them all the raw data? Talk about how you ended up.
I think the original view was, again, at least for me and most people I speak with, is the same thing, which is you think about a lot of things for your kids, like privacy, all of these things, agency, all of these things. But worrying about their safety is hugely clarifying, because none of the other stuff matters. If you are in conflict with safety for your kid, there's one thing, and that's make sure your kid's safe, right? And so that's very clarifying. So that's sort of the extreme end of it, which is you're sort of in it at that point in time. So you got to figure out how to kind of navigate your way out of it, which is how we started, because we were looking around saying, well, what can I put on our phone that will give me some of these insights? We couldn't find anything, so we said, let's just go build it. But part of the thinking there was, you start talking to parents that are not in it, and they say, hey, I kind of want to make sure my kid's okay, but I don't want to have them have it be sort of this big helicopter-y thing. And so
you can't spy on them, because if you start spying on them, they will find a way to shut you out.
And that's what I find so interesting about the approach.
The brilliance of what Hari and his product team did is, and this is where AI has done something remarkable, which is they have created something that is observational, and it actually reads sentiment. And because it's building this extraordinary knowledge base, it actually becomes predictive. And so when you take those three things together, you don't need to read their text. You don't actually need to see what they're doing in a way that becomes uncomfortable for them. It's a partnership that you have with your kid. And by the way, what you want for a 12-year-old is quite different from the controls that you want for a 16 or 17, which is just my point about drivers. You start them with a lot of controls.
Yeah.
And as they show they're ready for it and they know how to do it, you got to let them loose here. But right now, we are just throwing them out in the middle of the ocean with nothing.
So Hari, because the audience hasn't had the opportunity to see it, instead of saying your kid sent 6 texts to this person and here's what they said, it says, wow, your kid normally only sends 1 or 2 texts a day. They've sent 50. Or your kid normally sends 20 texts a day. They haven't sent any. It's those kind of conversation starters, right?
I mean, it's very much geared for that. And I think, the big thing we did at the very beginning was to say, look, this is not a tech problem, it's a human problem. So if you look at how humans have been solving this for the last 50 to 100 years, there's psychiatrists, psychologists, clinicians, people that have been thinking about this, engaging with kids in real life. And so we said, look, whatever we build has to be evidence-based. So we went and partnered up with Boston Children's Hospital. We brought in a chief medical officer. We built up a team of about 12 clinicians, et cetera. And we use them to take a lot of the insights they have from the field to help train the models. And it's very important. Like, I'll give you a simple example, right? This came up actually like a couple of weeks ago. The models found that there was a child that was drinking, underage. They were drinking, it was clear from the patterns that this is what's going on. Engineers and product people say, oh, we should just like send this off to the parents right away, which again is not a bad answer, by the way. We said, okay, well, let's go talk to the clinicians, see what they say. And they say, well, if this happened in our office, if a kid told us that, they had a drink last night, the questions going through our mind are, how old are they? Have they done this before? Can they drive? So there's this like kind of nuanced way of thinking about the problem, and then they decide, okay, should we call the parents or not? So our standard is if a clinician would call the parent if they were in active, counseling a child, that's really when you want to send an alert, because you don't want to be sort of the boy that cried wolf and start freaking out parents, which is like the last thing we want to do, basically.
But here's the thing. So 80% of girls 18 years old and under do not like their body shape. And now more than half of them are doing things that are unhealthy as a result of it. What the AI has been able to do is to sort of capture now the macro data of this and to be able to read into it. So now this is just now a simple cause and effect. Somebody downloads, a girl in that teenage demographic, downloads a calorie tracking app. Actually, you need to pay attention to it. It may be okay, but honestly, right now, we can tell you just on the amount of information that we've been able to see here, it's usually the beginning of a problem. Now, as a parent, if you know that, you can say, hey,
let's talk.
What are you doing? Why? Let's just talk about it here. And maybe it's all fine and okay, but if you don't know, how are you going to deal with it?
I mean, and look, thematically, it really is a partnership with the parents, because if you just think about the problem, right, which is through COVID, negative sort of emotional views for kids were kind of getting worse, and something happened in that 2 years. If you talk to any clinician, any hospital, they'll tell you like something weird happened, and after COVID ended, the caseload went up like 100x. Like, it was like insane. And the number of people that could treat these kids, there's 6,000 of them, and they're trained. It takes them a long time to get trained, but the caseload's now significantly higher. And so, how do you solve it, right? So the clear view is you got to recruit the parents. I mean, they're the front line of defense. They're hugely vested in this. And the problem for parents like myself is I don't know what's going on. Like, what is happening on the device,
So as a parent, I really want to keep this part of the conversation going. But while we have Jeffrey here, I did want to also set up another...
I was trying to run the clock, just to be clear.
You didn't quite run it all out. So
there we go.
We're going to have a really deep, rich discussion today on how this AI technology is changing the interaction with Hollywood, with content creators. And I really wanted to get your thoughts. We're going to be talking to the founder of Runway. We're going to be talking to Joseph Gordon-Levitt. We're going to see some cool video technology. But how are you thinking about how does this amazing technology, which does unlock a lot of creativity from people who might not have had the skills before, but it also threatens jobs. And we've been through this as an industry before. Hollywood had to navigate the Napster era. What are you thinking about as we sort of enter this time of really unprecedented opportunity, but potentially a lot of job destruction?
So I've been to this rodeo before. I've been through this personally. I arrived at a company, the Walt Disney Company, deep, rich history of extraordinary...
And if I recall, it was really smooth the whole time, right?
Never a bump in it. But traditional hand-drawn animation, was the foundation of the company. It was the heart and soul of the company. And, Little Mermaid or Beauty and the Beast or Lion King, these movies are, 125 to 135,000 hand-drawn cells, then inked and painted by hand. It's an extraordinary time, a great renaissance of storytelling and creativity. And then this amazing new technology pioneered by John Lasseter comes along, and it is breathtaking to some and very, very, very scary to others. And I can tell you, if you go back to that time, the resistance to wanting to do that, to make Toy Story, to make that 3-picture deal at Disney was huge. And the people most scared of it are the ones that were going to be disrupted by it. And the fact is that everybody was scared as to all the jobs are going to be lost, the computer's taking over. I mean, everything that you are hearing today are the issues that we had to deal with. And the result of it was you jump forward, and yes, there was disruption, but animation's never, ever been bigger than it is today. And there have never been more jobs in it. There are different jobs. And I think Jensen Huang has said that AI isn't going to replace people. It's going to replace people that don't use AI. And so just in the exact same analogy there is that the talent that went and learned how to use the computer as a new pencil and a new paintbrush in it, they thrived and prospered. And there was an extraordinary growth in the whole industry. Now, is it going to be exactly the same here? No, there never is. But I would say that if change is uncomfortable, irrelevance is going to be a whole lot harder.
So we're actually over time, but I want to ask one more question along these lines. So one of the things that I always saw coming was that AI was going to let you spend time in the universes you love. For me, that's like Legos and Sesame Street and Simpsons. But I thought it would be a joint project of the tech companies and the people that created that. Already with ChatGPT's new image generator, I can transform myself into that Sesame Street Muppet, into that Simpsons character. As one of the ones who helped develop some of these characters, does it bother you that I can enter the Shrek universe with only ChatGPT involved and not the studios?
Well, the problem is that there are lines here in this, and unfortunately, it's not a simple answer. It's a simple question for which there's a lot of complexity to it. Because
well, that's what I like to do. Ask a simple question.
But on the one hand, to allow you to become more attached, more immersed, more connected to those characters, which are somebody's intellectual property, and they are created and they are owned by them, and they have a value. But we have now a good, rich history of allowing these things to exist in different ways, in different places out in the world, in order for the people that are fans of them to relate, to connect, and now to interact with them in new ways. Finding the balance between being fairly compensated and for those usage, and at the same time to allow people to do things new and fun and exciting with it. It's somewhere between, there are lines there. That's all I'm saying.
So maybe we're in the Napster period and we haven't yet had the iTunes store moment.
Yeah, which you're going to. There's no question about it. And these tools are brilliant. They are incredible. And I think there's so much focus on how are they going to change. Well, here's it. Television came after movies. It didn't change movies. And YouTube came after TV. It didn't change TV. And TikTok came after YouTube. So there's something new coming. And that, to me, is the really most exciting thing about it. You're going to hear from people here on the stage today, some of the most talented people that are really pioneering these new tools of storytelling. And with it is actually going to come a new form of storytelling. And that, to me, is the most exciting part of it. It's not as how is it going to affect movies. It's going to allow filmmakers to actually, I think, probably in the same way that CG made 2D animation movies much richer experiences, and same thing's going to happen here.
Well, unfortunately, we have to leave it there. I'd love to keep talking. Everyone, please thank Hari and Jeffrey.